Ready for a deep dive. We're jumping into the thick of it with Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time, Book 8, The Path of Daggers.
Yeah, this one really ramps up the tension.
No kidding, it's like the calm before the storm, you know? Everyone's bracing themselves for this epic battle, the last battle, but they've got all this personal drama to deal with at the same time.
It's that contrast that makes it so compelling, I think.
Exactly. Take Elaine, for instance. Talk about being thrown into the fire.
Trying to reclaim her throne, leading armies, negotiating with the sea folk.
And those sea folk, they're a tough nut to crack. They've got this powerful artifact, the Bowl of the Winds, that Elaine desperately needs.
But their whole way of life revolves around freedom and independence. Imagine trying to convince them to hand over something so vital to their culture.
It's a testament to how dire the situation is that they're even considering it, right?
Absolutely. They wouldn't risk something like that unless the stakes were incredibly high.
And then there's Rand, our dragon reborn, dealing with the weight of prophecy and the distrust of basically everyone around him.
It's a lonely path, being the chosen one.
You said it. He's got all this power, but no one really understands what he's going through. Plus, he's constantly being pulled in different directions, even by the Aes Sedai, the women who can channel magic. They're supposed to be his allies.
Right, but they also have their own agendas. Many of them believe it's their duty to guide the Dragon Reborn, even if it means manipulating him.
Which I'm sure sits well with Rand.
Not so much. He's got trust issues, and who can blame him?
Okay, then we've got Perrin. Poor Perrin. He just wants to be a blacksmith. But fate has other plans. He can talk to wolves, leads an army, and now he's facing a rebellion from within his own ranks.
That whole situation with Masema is a prime example of how good intentions can go very, very wrong.
Talk about a fanatic.
Preaching about the Dragon Reborn, but twisting his words to gain power for himself. It's a classic case of charisma and fear-mongering, unfortunately.
The worst part is, he probably believes he's doing the right thing.
Which makes him even more dangerous. It's like looking in a warped mirror. You think you're seeing the truth, but it's distorted.
So, we've got Elaine battling for her throne, Rand trying to save the world while everyone doubts him, and Perrin's stuck between a rock and a hard place. And that's not even mentioning the bigger threats lurking in the shadows.
Right, we can't forget about the Seanchan.
Yeah, it's a whole other can of worms. This empire, they're like something out of a nightmare. They enslave women who can channel, they've got this ruthless, highly organized military machine.
And they're expanding their territory, consuming everything in their path.
It's terrifying, but also kind of fascinating. Like, what makes them tick? What do they want?
Power, ultimately.
Yeah.
Control. They believe their way is the only way to bring order to the world. And they're willing to do whatever it takes to make that happen.
And then, of course, there's the big bad himself, the puppet master behind it all.
Ah, yes. The Dark One. The embodiment of evil.
He's like this constant underlying threat, even though we don't actually see him in these excerpts. But you can feel his influence seeping in, whispering doubts, fueling fears.
It's insidious.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to be physically present to cause chaos.
He's playing the long game, right? Weakening everyone from the inside out.
Exactly. He's the ultimate twist master, manipulating events from the shadows.
And our heroes, they're the pawns in his game. Or are they? That's the question, isn't it? We left off talking about the Dark One, the ultimate evil, but let's circle back to these alliances forming. They're fascinating, really.
Yeah, like Elaine and the Sea Folk. Talk about an unlikely pairing, right?
It's baffling, almost. I mean, here you've got this proud, independent people who practically live on the ocean, and she convinces them to lend her the Bowl of the Winds.
Which is essentially like their most prized possession, right?
Yeah, it's not just some magical artifact. These excerpts suggest it's deeply tied to their culture, their way of life.
It makes you wonder what Elaine could have possibly said to convince them.
Right. What would it take for you to hand over something that important, something that valuable? It really speaks to the desperation of the situation.
They must realize that the threat of the Dark One, even the Seanchan, it's bigger than just their own corner of the world.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that even the most deeply held beliefs, those things you hold sacred, they can be challenged when the stakes are high enough.
It's a question of survival at that point.
And speaking of difficult choices, let's talk about Rand.
Ah, yes. The Dragon Reborn. Trying to save the world, one uneasy alliance at a time.
It's heartbreaking, in a way. The excerpts show just how much he's struggling with the weight of these prophecies, the constant distrust from everyone around him. It's no wonder he's willing to trust some shady characters.
He's desperate for any kind of support, any kind of understanding. And unfortunately, that makes him vulnerable.
It's like he's walking a tightrope, you know? trying to balance his destiny with his humanity, and it's tearing him apart.
All that power, all that responsibility. It can be a heavy burden to bear.
Okay, but it's not just Rand and Elaine dealing with tough choices.
No,
They're
definitely not. What about poor Perrin? Talk about stuck between a rock and a hard place.
trying to hold on to his goodness while leading an army. It's a recipe for disaster. And then you've got this Massima character throwing fuel on the fire.
Ugh, Massima. A cautionary tale if I ever saw one. The dangers of blind faith, taking a kernel of truth, twisting it, manipulating people with it,
Yeah, he's like the ultimate example of how easily good intentions can go wrong.
exploiting people's fear and uncertainty, all in the name of the Dragon Reborn.
He probably believes he's doing the right thing too, doesn't he?
Most likely. That's what makes it even scarier.
And speaking of scary, let's delve into the Seanchan a little deeper. Every time we talk about them, it's like looking into the abyss.
They are quite unsettling, aren't they? The excerpts really highlight just how ruthless and organized they are. It sends chills down your spine.
It's their conviction that gets me, I think. They're utterly convinced that their way of life, is the only way.
And their magic system, the way they can enslave channelers, it's terrifyingly effective.
It's like they've weaponized magic itself.
In a way, they have. And it makes them a formidable enemy.
So, to recap, we've got Elaine forging risky alliances, Rand on the verge of a breakdown, and Perrin facing a rebellion. And then, looming over it all, are the Seanchan and the Dark One.
Quite the cheerful picture we've painted, isn't it?
Well, there's always hope, right? That's what these stories are all about. But yeah, things are about to get real interesting.
To say the least.
So we were talking about the Seanchan and the Dark One, but, even within the supposed good guys, there's this whole power struggle happening.
Oh, absolutely. The White Tower with the Aes Sedai, it's like its own viper's nest.
Right. It makes you wonder, if they're supposed to be these wise, powerful women, how come they can't even get their own house in order?
Well, that's the thing about power, isn't it? It can be intoxicating and blinding.
And Egwene, right. She's now the Maryland seat, the leader of the Aes Sedai. Talk about a meteoric rise to power.
She's young, ambitious, determined to make changes. But the excerpts, they hint at the cost of that ambition.
Yeah, like, is she losing sight of who she is in the process? It's a classic dilemma.
Power corrupts, or so they say. And Egwene's story really makes you question that, Where do you draw the line?
It's like, how far are you willing to go to achieve your goals, even if those goals are, for the greater good? It's murky.
It is. And it's not just Egwene grappling with this. Think about Rand, Perrin, even Elaine. They're all making compromises, forming alliances they might not like, all in the name of saving the world.
Right. It's like they say, in war, the first casualty is innocence, or something like that.
Exactly. And it's that moral complexity that I find so compelling about these books. There are no easy answers, no clear-cut good guys and bad guys.
Yeah, like, everyone's a little bit right and everyone's a little bit wrong. It's messy, just like real life.
Exactly. And it's that realism, that emotional depth, that makes these characters so relatable, even though they're fighting dragons and battling the Dark One and all that.
So where does that leave us? I mean, things seem pretty bleak, right?
On the surface, perhaps. But there's always hope. That's the
I've-
thing about humanity. We're resilient.
We find a way.
We do. As long as there are people willing to stand up for what they believe in, to fight for what's right, even when the odds are stacked against them.
There's a chance.
Always a chance.
That's a good note to end on, I think. A little bit of hope goes a long way.
Indeed it does.
Well, that's been another deep dive. Thanks for joining us as we plumbed the depths of the Path of Daggers. Join us next time as we delve even deeper into this world that Robert Jordan has created. Until then, may you always find your own path, even in the darkest of times.